Okay, so we've talked about the soft start. We've talked about managing emotions. If you haven't seen those videos, go back and watch those videos because those are more beginning. I think about healthy conflict as having beginning, middle, end, as having before, during, after. To some extent, those boundaries are slightly artificial, or you might not want to be too rigid about them. You might want to be able to flow. But generally speaking, if we zoom out, there's kind of this before, during, after. So we've talked about the before or the beginning. I now want to talk about the during. So what do you do during? Let's say your partner has brought a soft start up to you. They said, "Hey, my beloved, the other week you said you would take the dog out, and I was really disappointed when I got home and the dog hadn't been taken out. And I did it because we love the dog. It's got to happen. But I really was disappointed by that. I would love it if we could find a way to try to prevent that from happening next time." All right, now we're fighting. Right? Now we're in a conflict. I've said I was disappointed with what happened, that you made a commitment to me, and rightly so, I'm disappointed that it didn't happen. That's really not shocking, shouldn't be rocket science. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, the other person is probably going to be disappointed. Here's the thing, we can turn this into connection, or it can just spiral out into disconnection. How do you keep the train on the tracks? How do you make this something good? During, you've heard the soft startup and now we're in the middle of it. So what do? We're going to talk about bridging the gap. You're going to make attempts to build a bridge between me and you to keep us on the same team, even when it feels like suddenly there's this canyon opening up between the two of us and we're on opposite sides, right? There's this huge gap. How do we build a bridge and keep the connection workable, keep the connection structurally sound enough to have a productive, healthy conflict? The answer, and that's the topic of this video, is bridging attempts. Here's where it's worth noting that the way I talk about this diverges slightly from the way the Gottmans will talk about it. So the Gottmans will talk about repair attempts. That's a perfectly wonderful way of this. Nothing wrong with that. I only find that it can be a little bit confusing for folks when we talk about there's the repair attempts made during a conflict, and then there's big picture repair after, right? After a conflict, the repair of coming back together, solidifying the connection, opening up communication. And while those all might be part of the same idea of repair, I just find it simpler, when I speak with clients, to separate these out, to separate the during conflict skill from the after conflict skill. So I've changed the name only to make it clearer that bridging is a during skill. You're doing this during a disagreement or a conflict. So I've talked enough about the idea. What is a bridging attempt? I've got a little bit of a script here to keep me on track, hopefully. And it starts with an image, right? If you were really in my office and we were really doing this, couples therapy thing, I'd give you a piece of paper much like this. And it's worth seeing, right? We've all been here. There's this gap opening up. We've all been here. How do we do this? How do we have a rope bridge between us? What are bridging attempts? Bridging attempts are small intentional attempts you make during a conversation, disagreement, or misunderstanding to help keep the conversation on track and the emotional connection open. Bridging attempts are phrases or gestures that show that you're actively listening, emotionally attuned to your person, and making a good faith effort to understand, really truly trying to understand, not putting on a show of understanding, not asking leading questions to win, really actually trying to understand them. Frequent use of bridging attempts helps both partners feel heard and respected, even when they don't see eye to eye. And just to be clear, bridging attempts aren't about admitting you're wrong or saying that the other person is right. They're about keeping the conversation supple and workable by managing the natural temptation that we all have to close ranks under pressure and stick tightly to our own point of view. In other words, making that divide wider by saying, no, 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 I'm the one that's right and you're the one that's wrong, and I won't listen. And the divide just gets bigger and bigger. Why do bridging attempts matter? During conflict, it's so natural to want to dig in and hold your ground. It's part of human nature. Often this is a result of our nervous system's fight or flight response. When both people become entrenched in their positions, the conflict has absolutely nowhere to go. It's not going to become productive. It's not going to be healthy because there's no movement. When that happens, tension rises, right? As both parties increase the intensity of their efforts to be understood. And that might look something like this, right? An internal dialogue. They're not listening to me at all. I need to make myself louder and angrier, and then they'll finally hear me, right? Then I'll finally get through. And before you know it, you're screaming, what I call emotional cannon fire, as rock is shaking the walls. It's not good. It's actually bad. Frequent use of bridging attempts creates a different dynamic. By making frequent and consistent attempts to build a small bridge of understanding between me and you, the conversation has this flexibility that it needs to move in a more productive direction. So I'm going to give you, about 8 different, what I call flavors of bridging attempt. These are specific techniques that you can use. This list is not exhaustive, and I'm sure I'll say that again because it's in the script. But this is a good starting point. If you were to print out this 8 and have them in front of you during a difficult conversation, you would be pretty well armed with things to say that are more likely to be helpful, that are more likely to keep the conversation moving. And if you can really get an internal sense, sort of a muscle memory of these kinds of things and how they feel, then you can start improvising, right? Much like the soft startup. Then you can start adapting, tweaking how you say these things, finding new ways to build a bridge. But I'm kind of going off rhapsodizing again. Let me talk about these different flavors of bridging attempt. Before I do, it's important to note that bridging attempts can be really anything that adds a little love, lightness, or goodwill to the situation. That's very open-ended. It might be really highly unique between you and another individual about what brings lightness or goodwill to the situation. You might have inside jokes. You might have things that I haven't thought of, right, to put on this list. Nonetheless, here's just a few specific examples. Number 1, acknowledging self-limitation. This is about recognizing your own limits. Limits aren't really a bad thing. We all have them. It's just a fact of life. In this case, you can use your own self-understanding, right? Your own acknowledgement that you have limitations to the benefit of the relationship, to what I think of as to throw that rope bridge to the other person. For example, something like, I'm realizing my emotions might be getting in the way of fully hearing you. Wow, right? I'm mature enough to realize, as I'm checking in on my emotional intensity, part of that emotion video, right? I'm realizing that my emotions might be getting in the way of hearing you right now. Another example, it's hard for me to fully understand the way you see it because I have a very different worldview. So I haven't said you're wrong and you think about this wrong and you're dumb. I've said, hey, my limitation is that I have this I'm locked in this totally different worldview. It's really hard for me to totally understand you. But, and the implication is, but I want to. And that one will definitely come up again. Moving on. Number 2, second flavor, the skillful rewind. This is a great tool to have in your back pocket at all times. We've all done this. You say something, maybe well-intentioned, maybe it wasn't so well-intentioned, it just slipped out. It happens to all of us. The mouth goes, right, before the sort of conscious brain has had a chance to filter it. And you see it on the other person's face and their body language that they didn't like it. Okay. If you did mean to upset them, don't do that. If you didn't mean to upset them, before this goes further off the rails, do a skillful rewind. I think that came out wrong. Let me rewind that. I can see that didn't land. That's not how I meant it. Let me try that again. Before you go off, because the other person's they're gonna take that red meat and they are going to latch on, right? And you're going to be really fighting. Before that happens, rewind. That didn't come out the way I meant it. Let me try again. Okay. 3, willingness to understand. I kind of hinted at this one. Willingness to understand without agreement. This will go all the way through all of these. I'm never asking you to agree with something you don't agree with. You're in a conflict for a good reason. You see it 2 different ways. When I show that image of right, the people kind of bridging the gap, right? We're not pretending that there isn't a gap. We're not pretending that you have 2 different positions. We're not pretending that isn't the case. We're trying to build a bridge that hopefully one or both of you can cross or meet at a middle point, whatever, in order to have a relationship, to feel heard, to feel cared for, right? So I'm never going to say, oh, just agree with the other person, because that's not helpful. But you can show a willingness to understand that goes a long way when somebody feels that you want to understand them in a deeper, right, in that felt sense of, okay, this person is trying to know me. I don't have to fight. I don't have to fight for their attention. They're trying. That might sound like, I don't get it, but I want to. Help me understand, right? Tell me more. I don't understand this point of view. I don't understand your position. I don't understand the way you see it. It's truthful. But I care about you. You're important to me. So what's important to you is important to me. I want to understand. Help me understand. I'm just showing you this willingness that I'm with you. I might not get it for a number of reasons, but I'm with you. Okay. 4, show flexibility. Okay, again, different from agreement, but maybe there's something leading to agreement. There's a foreshadowing of potential agreement, and that's flexibility. This is about showing just a slight willingness to move or acknowledge the other person's point. For example, I'm starting to see what you mean. When you put it that way, it makes more sense. So we've gone from, no, I don't like what you're saying. No, that's not what I agree with, to, okay, you've explained it a little more. Maybe I still don't understand fully. Maybe I don't agree. But when you say it that way, when you've explained it this way, I'm starting to see what you mean. I've never said I agree. I've never said you're right. I've never said let's do it your way. I'm saying, okay, I'm beginning to be flexible here. You're starting to maybe convince me. There's openness. Again, that brings people's defensiveness down. They feel that they're getting through, and so they stop shaking the cage saying, look at me. They go, okay, I'm getting through on some level. Yes, I wish you would just drop everything and agree with me. But if that's not what's going to happen here, and let's be honest, in a long-term relationship and this partnership like a marriage, so rarely it's just, yep, that's it. I drop everything and I'm on the same page. So the least you can do is try to show flexibility. I'm willing to go there with you. We don't have to disconnect fully because I am going with you on this. Okay, number 5, humor. High risk, high reward. This is your mileage may vary. Something like a goofy, silly look, an inside joke, making a silly voice. Of course, attempts at humor, like attempts at bridging the gap, may or may not land. If they do, they can introduce lightness back into the situation, especially a situation that's starting to feel heavy, that's starting to feel tense. Of course, we've all seen it. I've seen it I've seen it numerous times in my office with a married couple. Someone's really trying to make a point. They're really trying to get a point across. And the other person turns it into a joke, right? They turn it into some kind of vulgar sexual joke, or they just a distraction, something. Oh, you're always haha, just like that. And the other person just gets more mad, right? Because instead of feeling that they've been listened to, they actually feel that you're intentionally distracting from the situation. So humor is going to really depend on timing, like all comedy. And it's really going to depend on your relationship, as far as when is that helpful, when is that hurtful. Generally speaking, they say laughter is the best medicine. In my opinion, it is one of the strongest bonding forces that bonds two people together in a loving, feeling good way is laughing together. Timing is everything. Timing, word choice. Some jokes just aren't funny. Some jokes are mean, you know? So be careful with this one. If you can laugh, really laugh, it's going to be good for the relationship. But if you totally whiff it, that's one step back. Okay, number 6. Ironically, number 6 probably should be number 1. If you've watched this far and I haven't lost you, great, you're in luck. Number 6 is validation. I said humor is risky. High risk, high reward, because laughter is so powerful, but making a joke that doesn't land is actually kind of a step backward. Here's one that, in my experience, almost always works. This is a near universal, this is a skeleton key for tension. I'm not going to say it is perfect. I'm going to say it's nearly perfect, that I rarely see it not work. And that's validation. Validation doesn't mean agreeing. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. Validating something about what the other person is going through. Something. It does not mean agreeing with them. It means that you're emotionally attuned enough to see the obvious reality of their emotional experience, otherwise known as empathy. Validating what you can. Validating something about your partner, the other person's emotional experience, does not mean agreeing or admitting fault. Rather, validating something about another person's experience frequently results in a lowering of defensiveness. It shows that you're listening, really listening, not just to the words, but to the feelings underneath them. It might sound like this: I know you're hurt. Or, I get why that was upsetting to you. Or, I know this is really important to you. And you do have to say it the right way. You can say, I get why that was upsetting to you. Not helpful. Not helpful. You don't mean that. How you say it, right? If you can do validation and really show with your voice, right? I understand you really do feel this way, and I'm sensitive to that. Almost universally brings down the temperature of a conversation. I've rarely seen it. Again, if you really say it with emotion, I cannot think of a time I haven't seen it work. If you say it like someone's pointing a gun to your head, yeah, well, guess what? That rarely works. That rarely does anything good. So you do have to really try here. Again, it goes back to the beginning of the video. Good faith. Are you making a good faith effort? If yes, proceed. If no, rethink your strategy. All right, number 7. Number 7 also should be higher on the list. Curiosity. The very least you can do when you don't like what someone's saying, when you don't understand, when you don't think you agree, is find out more. The first step to solving any problem is to study the problem. Don't assume you know everything and start reacting. Try to become interested in their point of view. Try to find something to be curious about that will help you understand the situation better. Open-ended questions will get you way further than yes or no question. Open-ended questions sound like who, what, when, where, why, and how. Why is that so important to you? Right? How can we make this situation better? And on and on and on. Instead of saying, are you mad at me, yes or no? Do you want me to do something, yes or no? What could I have done differently? I'm listening, right? Tell me more. What would you like to have happened differently? And that would have felt better. Now, the person can take it wherever they want to take it, and you're going to get much better information than boxing them into a yes or no. When you say, all right, here's this open question. I'm listening. Tell me whatever feels important to tell me. You're going to get better information. So do that frequently. All right, finally, the last one I'm going to offer up in this video is an appeal to shared values. Foundation of all great relationships is this, right? Literal is a metaphorical foundation of shared values. It's compassion, empathy, faith, morality, financial well-being, the safety, security. There's no right or wrong list of values, but most stable relationships have this core, group of kind of shared values of who are we trying to be in the world. And so, even when you feel you're disconnecting, it can be really helpful to say, hey, well, I know we both value compassion. It seems that we're not agreeing on exactly how to do that in this situation, but I know this is important to us. I know we both value charity. We're disagreeing on where the money should go, but let's remember, right, that this is actually something that unites us, that we agree on. All of those I've just spoken at length are examples of bridging attempts. By no means is this an exhaustive list. Keep in mind that a bridging attempt can be absolutely anything that introduces lightness, love, or goodwill to the situation. Okay, and the last part that I want to talk about is the notion of attempts. Why do I keep saying attempts? And the word attempts does come from the Gottmans. Credit where credit is due. Attempts. It doesn't sound like it's guaranteed to work, huh? When you make an attempt at something. Kind of implies that it might go wrong. How do I make sure my bridging attempt is successful? Okay, well, in their more than 30 years of accumulated research, Doctors John and Julie Gottman have so far never found any magic words that make a bridging attempt successful every time. So, the initiator, the one sending over their rope bridge, right, can't guarantee their own success by crafting just the right line. Doesn't work that way. Rather, what they found is that the greater the off-court goodwill between two people, the greater the likelihood that the person receiving a bridging attempt will respond positively. To put it another way, the more likable your partner feels you've been recently, the more likely they are to respond positively to your bridging attempt. So it's really in your interest to invest some time and effort into being likable towards them. Who should be making bridging attempts? Is it just the person who started it? No. In short, everyone should be making bridging attempts all the time. It doesn't matter who started the conflict or who feels more in the right. When you agree to play by the rules of healthy conflict, right, to step onto the court of healthy conflict, both of you need to be ready to make bridging attempts frequently and consistently, even when you're sure you're right. You probably wouldn't be fighting if you didn't think you were right, yeah? The goal is to keep the dialogue open and prevent the conflict from hardening into a stalemate. And that's a shared responsibility. It takes both partners to keep things supple and workable. All right, finally, let's talk about vibe soup. I'm going to make a whole other video on vibe soup. While making bridging attempts is crucial, the action, right? Throwing the line is crucial. It's worth remembering that their success often depends on the overall goodwill or warmth of your relationship recently. This is what I call your vibe soup. Good soup leads to a stronger friendship, which in turn makes your bridging attempts more successful when you're in those conflict moments. So I'll make another video about vibe soup and you can watch that one because this one's already getting way long. That's bridging attempts. I've provided you 8 different very specific ways to do that. The key takeaway should be, though, that a bridging attempt is anything that adds love, lightness, or goodwill to the situation. And this is a during skill. During a disagreement, how do you maintain that connection, right? I throw you a bit of a rope bridge and you throw yours, and we're both holding on together so that we don't fly off into outer space way, way far apart, right? And disconnect. Easier said than done, but like all these things, they're skills. If you practice them, you get better and better. Eventually, you become really, really good at them. They become second nature. All right, keep that in mind as you move through your week. Go forth and be a blessing to yourself and those around you.